One of the most important things to understand about the contemporary Arab world or the wider Islamic world is that there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of Muslims, individual citizens, who are genuinely and I think reasonably upset about many issues, whether it's corruption in their own countries, cost of living pressures, abuse of power, foreign occupations, foreign armies, a lot of different things that people are upset about. And in most of these countries, they don't have mechanisms by which they can achieve a redress of grievance through the normal political process. For instance, political parties, elections, open media, the court system, lobbying through civil society groups. The normal mechanisms that are available in democratic society to bring about change are not available in most of the countries of the Arab world and in many other Muslim majority countries, though there are some impressive Muslim majority democracies where you do have mechanisms for redress of grievance, like, for instance, Turkey, for instance, is extremely impressive. And there are others, Indonesia and others like it. But in the Middle East and the Arab world, mostly, you have this problem of people with real grievances and very few, if any, mechanisms to deal with those grievances. Therefore, they turn, in many cases, to their religion as a last resort. And this is something that's universal. The civil rights movement was led by religious people in the US. The anti-communist movement had a lot of religious leaders. The anti-apartheid movement was led by religious people. This is a normal process for people to turn to religion when they don't have any other means to deal with their oppression, their subjugation, their dehumanization, their marginalization, and their vulnerability. And in the Arab Islamic region, people have seen Islamist movements, we call them Islamist with I-S-T at the end, Islamist movement or Islamists, meaning people who use religion, the Islamic religion, as a mechanism for political mobilization and political action. And so Islamist movements have become very strong all over the region, and there is a big variety of them. This is really the critical point to understand. While the overwhelming majority of people in most of the countries of the Middle East, at least, share some grievances, economic, social, political, ideological, military, they share a lot of grievances. The overwhelming majority have responded through nonviolent, peaceful means of protest or activism. For instance, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, or the Muslim Brothers in places like Jordan, or equivalents of groups in Morocco or other places. The overwhelming majority have tried to achieve peaceful change. Small numbers have turned to violence here and there, very, very small numbers, and a very, very few have gone over the edge and joined movements like al-qaida, Osama bin Laden's movement, based now in Afghanistan or Pakistan or somewhere. And the number of militants in al-qaida who practice that kind of terrorism compared to the total number of Muslims is almost exactly the same proportion as the number of American Christians who become terrorists and blow up abortion clinics compared to the total number of American Christians. And those percentages need to be kept in mind, that the terrorists who practice terror in the name of their Islamic religion are an infinitesimally small percentage, as are the Christian terrorists in the United States who kill doctors and blow up clinics. The vast majority are not using violence. And among that vast majority, you have different shades of groupings. You have people like the Muslim Brothers, or in Turkey you had the Justice and Development Party and its predecessors who engaged in active political work and eventually won and are now running the government in Turkey. You have groups that engage in politics, like the Muslim Brothers in Jordan joined the elections and were in parliament, and then they got out and boycotted. In Egypt, the same thing. They were in parliament and then they boycotted the last election, depending on the circumstances of the day. But largely they engage in democratic politics to an extent, even though they know that the system is gerrymandered and they're not really going to have a chance to fully express their views in terms of bringing about changes in the government's policies. They know that, but still they engage because they want to try to change things for the better. And you have other groups like Hezbollah and Hamas who are in situations of Israeli military occupation, and they engage in armed resistance, and they use violence against the occupying military force. Same way you get people who attack the American army in Afghanistan or Iraq, they see it as an occupying force, they attack it. The Israelis in South Lebanon and West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem similarly are subjected to military attacks, and that were largely successful in driving the Israelis out of South Lebanon and driving them out of Gaza. And this is a form of resistance that is by and large seen as legitimate under the prevailing international humanitarian law and the rules of war. That if you're occupied by a foreign military power, you can fight that power, if you fight against the army particularly. What's not acceptable is if you go blow up a pizza parlor in Tel Aviv. That is not the same as attacking Israeli soldiers in Nablus. There's a qualitative difference. But Hezbollah and Hamas and others have largely seen themselves as fighting a military resistance. Some elements go and attack targets inside Israel. This is a debate that's going on whether this is justified or not. So we have to see these gradations of views of groups that are motivated and defined very much by their Islamic morality in terms of seeking justice, seeking equality, seeking dignity, seeking the best human values, and trying to change political events in their society, change the manner in which political power is exercised to bring about a better society, a more fair, more equitable, more productive society. A few people will be more aggressive than others. Some will engage in street confrontations. One or two will engage in bombs here and there. If they're occupied by a foreign military power, they will fight that power militarily, just as they are occupied militarily. And you have to see this whole range of views and sentiments and actions and strategies to really get a complete picture of the many different forms of Islamist activism, Islamist politics, Islamist resistance. And if there's one word that captures, I think, the most important elements or the most important commonalities to all of these movements, it's the word resistance. And resistance not just as military resistance, but resistance to forces that oppress you. It could be your own government that's using police power or the intelligence security systems that are oppressing you. It could be the economic system that exploits you. It could be other factors of the uneven application of resources in society, where some people get water, some people don't. Some people get electricity, some people don't. That kind of oppressive behavior is seen by most people to be unacceptable, and they fight back against it. They resist that kind of abuse of power that dehumanizes them or subjects them to uneven treatment, inequitable treatment. It's important to know that the rallying cry of the Islamist movements is al-adala wal-karama, which means equity or equitable behavior, equitable treatment, and dignity. These are the rallying cries of most of the Islamist movements. So dignity is what they seek as the end result of their political action or their resistance. An equitable society is what they say they want. And most of all, I think they want respect. They want to be treated with respect as individual human beings or as entire collections of people or societies or governments or states or nations. They want to be treated with respect, not subjected to double standards, whether that means applying UN resolutions equitably around the world or treating people fairly according to a single standard when it comes to nuclear power or anything of that nature. So I think these are the main points that I would point out as important ones to understand when looking at the very many different kinds of movements that are acting, using a vocabulary of Islam and of faith, but in fact represent a very wide spectrum of different kinds of groups that behave in different sorts of ways. When you look across the region, you really don't see any real serious, credible signs of any country in the Arab world that's democratizing in any significant way. You've had liberalizations all over the place. You've had countries that loosened their control mechanisms. You've had countries that opened up the space so that you could create political parties and opposition groups and civil society, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, lobby groups, special interest groups. The press was more open. The parliamentary system was revived in many countries after having been shut down for many years. You had elections, you have parliaments that changed. But none of this has led to any change in how government policies are managed. You haven't had any serious change in government policies because it's a small group of people who control the executive branch and the security services, and this is what defines most of the Arab world and the economic power that comes with that. So there isn't really any serious example of democratization in the Arab countries. You have had others, though, that are impressive. Turkey, I would mention, as a very impressive example of serious, credible democratization that was led by Islamist groups that toned down their Islamism a little bit after having been hit hard by the Turkish state, the security, military-dominated state in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And finally, they kept coming back in different forms, the Islamists, and finally they won at the mayor level and municipal level and then at the national level, and now they're running the country with a mildly Islamist form of personal politics, but accepting the secular nature of Turkish governance. So I think Turkey is a very good example where a Muslim majority society can make that evolution peacefully into a democratic and accountable political system, remaining republican and constitutional, remaining peaceful and democratic, and prospering economically. I think Turkey is a great example. You've had other examples around the world, Malaysia, Indonesia, at various times, Bangladesh, Pakistan, others have had some serious examples of democratic governance. Some were sustained, others were not. So I think this is a question that plagues the Arab world, which is, why is it that the Arab world is the only collectively non-democratic region in the entire world? Why have we not had any serious democratic transformations? This is an important question that we need to keep asking and to try to find the answer. A lot of people are trying to understand this reality and to come to terms with it. More importantly, to change it so that we do ultimately join the rest of the world in making democratic transformations, as has happened in every other part of the world to a large degree.